So we have a Sheikh, Imam Majid, some of you might know. He is the Imam at the Adams Center in Virginia. He was invited to represent the Muslim community to be at the prayer service after the election of the one and only, right? Trump, yeah, you know. And so it was a controversial issue. Many people didn't want him to go and represent. This is a man who, you know, doesn't seem to be for Muslims. But Imam Majid did something that was very strategic and powerful. He recited the following ayah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ خَلْقُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ أَلْسِنَتِكُمْ وَأَلْوَانِكُمْ إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِلْعَالَمِينَ. And amongst his signs, and this is the translation that he provided, and amongst his signs is the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the diversity in your colors and languages. Indeed, in that are signs for those who have knowledge. So this particular verse is very, very powerful. It talks about the diversity, not only within the Muslim community, but the diversity at large. And it was very interesting because the reaction from that, it's hard to react negatively to such a beautiful, beautiful verse. And I wanted to share that because oftentimes when we think about marginalized populations, we think marginalized people of color. Right now, oftentimes we think of the Muslim community as a marginalized community. But oftentimes, people living with disabilities, people living with different diagnoses and conditions, oftentimes this is a marginalized group within a marginalized group. And this is something that we can probably all resonate. And I, alhamdulillah, by the mercy of God, I've had the privilege of meeting and interacting and hanging out with the Smile family, some of whom are here today. And it's really helped my perspective to evolve because I've heard many, many stories, and I'm here to share some of those stories with you. Think of it as more representative. But I've been honored to share some of those stories with you in the hopes that together we come up with sustainable solutions. We share ideas, and together we make our communities more inclusive and more accessible to everyone. And within these stories, two really dominant themes have emerged. The one we can probably all resonate with, and that is, given the socio-political climate, we turn to our communities now more than ever. We turn to our institutions, our Islamic schools, our Saturday and Sunday schools, our after-school programs, our halakas, our events, such as this one today. It seems a little bit toxic out there. And it will, inshallah, get better. But we also are able to rely on one another as a community. We have similar values. We share similar beliefs. We might speak the same language as some people we meet here. We might have similar cultural things that we share. So there's nothing wrong with that. So I've heard many people are more and more and more reliant on the community. And I feel like I'm one of those people. But the other sort of thing that stands out with these stories, and one of our moms will share maybe a little bit today, inshallah, but one of the things that stands out in talking to these families is that as there is more and more of a reliance on being part of the community, it seems more and more that people are excluded from the community. And there's a few reasons for that. One, we talk about physical accessibility. And physical accessibility, are our spaces accessible to people? Do we have wheelchair ramps? You know, do we have signage for people? Do we have announcements made in, auditory and visual? Things like that. It's for us to be able to access places. But I'll still give you an example of two stories with regards to physical accessibility in our community. And before I go on, I want to say that when we talk about inclusion and accessibility, I'm not saying, and I don't think anyone is saying, that there is a sign outside of our centers that say, not welcome. Rather, these are things that we need to talk about, that we need to bring forth so that we can only get better, inshallah. So there was a woman who came up to us, a mother of some kids that we work with, and she said that she's in a wheelchair, and she said she uses a wheelchair rather, and she had gone to a masjid, a local center, and she was able to access the prayer area, the musalla area, but there was an issue for her because sometimes she found the programs to be long and she had to use the restroom, the bathroom. And the toilet area was accessible, but when she went to go do wudu, there was the traditional wudu style where there is the bench and then the faucets a little bit further, a little bit up ahead. And so she wasn't able to do wudu. And she felt very, kind of embarrassed, kind of shy about this issue. So what happened? She stopped coming. And I'm not referring, in any of these stories, I'm not referring to this center, please know that. But I do want to share real stories so that we can talk about this very real issue. The second example is also of a local center, and there's an elevator, but the elevator is in the women's section. So there's a man, he came up to us and he reported, he said, sister, it's really hard. It's a little strange, I have to go through the women's section to get to the men's section, and nobody else does that but me. These are examples of physical accessibility. And let me tell you, let's be very clear that this issue is not an issue that is exclusive to the Muslim community. A quick walk downtown will tell you that storefronts, restaurants, churches, even government buildings are not accessible. But our government also acknowledges that, which is why in the Disability Act, we have a goal that in 2025, Canada will become an accessible place, inshallah. So there are organizations there within the Muslim community, also outside of the Muslim community, that are there to help. The government also has several initiatives put in place, workshops and resources at our disposal, so that we can really, really work towards this goal. Because our spaces should be places that everybody feels welcome at. The second piece to this is something that's a little bit harder. And the reason why I say that is because the stories that I will share, there's two stories, I won't keep you too long. I know you're here to hear Imaam Slimi, so inshallah, I'll be quick. But this is the issue of social accessibility. That you can have ramps and you can have, different ways to share information. But if culturally we are not accessible, if we are not allowing people to have access to our services and our knowledge, our education, our supports, even our company, then we are not truly being accessible. We are not being inclusive. The first story, and these are very close to home for me, and I find them to be very heartbreaking, but the first story is of a local center. It did have an elevator. And there was a mother whose child was using a wheelchair, and they had gone for prayer. And the mother was about to take her child up to pray in the area, and a woman stopped her and said, "I'm sorry, can you read? The sign says staff only." So the mother said, "Well, he can't use the stairs." And the woman said, "But the rule is that's for staff only." This happened right, in the GTA. And so the woman felt very bad, and she left. And in speaking to her, I know that she never went back to that particular center. But sometimes we have these rules that we've made. We don't always think how they're impacting people. These are social rules. other example is of a little girl in our community. She lives with Down syndrome. And she has, like the medical or scientific term is echolalia. Echolalia means that she repeats what another person says. So when somebody says something, if it catches her, and if she's interested, she tends to repeat. But with this echolalic behavior, she not only repeats the words, but she repeats in the same volume and in the same tune. So they were at the masjid for Jum'ah, for Friday prayer, and the mu'adhin says, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, and the young girl begins to repeat. But she repeats in the same volume and in the same tune. But her language wasn't very clear. She had some difficulty with articulation. And a brother from the men's section walked to the women's section and said, can somebody please get her to sit down and be quiet? And it was heartbreaking for many reasons. One, because she was a child, and we need to encourage our children to mimic the mu'adhin, not, like to be like them. That's what children want to do when they come to the masjid. They want to, mimic the Imaam or the mu'adhin, or the brothers want to mimic or imitate the brothers, the sisters want to mimic or imitate the sisters. But the one thing about this child was not only she had no ill intention in her to be doing this. And her mother was very, very upset. And her mother ended up actually leaving the space. And, unfortunately, this is again one of those stories where she decided to turn around and not look back. She said to me personally, she said, Sakina, I have enough struggle. I don't need to come to my center just to be told to leave. And subhanAllah, this is such a welcoming community. But I wanted to share these stories because these stories do exist. We need to make our centers inclusive, accessible. We need to make our Islamic schools inclusive and accessible. Very few, if any, Islamic schools will accept, and I say that word, I kind of cringe when I say that word, accept children living with disabilities. Now, the main rationale behind that when we talk to people is funding and resources. Oftentimes people say that, we don't have the funding or the resources for this. And I understand that, but I do want to make one point. I started off by quoting a verse from the Quran that spoke about diversity. The Muslim community is so rich in its diversity. We are a community of people from different backgrounds, different communities, different ethnicities, different classes. It is one of the things that makes the Muslim community so beautiful. We speak different languages. We have different cultures. But within this richness of diversity, we also have access to different professionals, different educational professionals, people with expertise, people like our sister Rabia Kader is in the audience. I was so pleased to see her. She's from the Canadian Association of Muslims with Disabilities. We have people like her at our disposal who we can turn to and ask questions to. This is really, really important. And the other thing about our community in this richness of diversity and education is, subhanAllah, amongst us, we are a very resourceful community. And if changes need to be made, inshallah, we can make them. And like forums like today, we can continue to raise awareness and inshallah make our spaces safe spaces for everyone, spaces that are accessible and inclusive. Jazakallah khair.
MashaAllah, takbir. Wonderful, mashallah. You should come and speak more here. Beautiful, mashallah. I understand why they chose you to speak. May Allah bless you. You mentioned Sister Rabia Khidr, and Sister Rabia, if you want to do she's familiar with this place, so if she wants to interject, she's very welcome. She has spoken many times about this subject at this masjid and other mosques and created awareness, and a lot of credit goes to her when it came to grants and how to apply, where to apply. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Alhamdulillah, I have spoken about this. We have also, in conjunction with the Canadian Muslims with Disabilities Association, which is run by Sister Rabi'a, every year we have a khutbah, Jum'ah, and halaqa. We speak about this issue. I'm sure you've gone around, probably is this your first time to be in the center here?
First time in this.
First time. Well, there are 8 accesses with disability to this place. Yes, the most common one is there. We did actually on purpose that design, but the front one, we have special dedicated staff on Friday to receive people. Sometimes we run out of parking space, and it's very difficult. But this is proportional. The challenge, the more space we have, the more resources, the easier it's going to get, inshallah. But I'm more concerned of the other accessibility, social accessibility. And this social accessibility has been also within the Arabs before Islam. And Islam tried, I say tried, to lie and say solved it? No. Tried to solve it because it's a very sensitive issue. And I'll quote, I was told many years ago by a brother, he said, Alhamdulillah, we Muslims, we don't have too many deaf people, blind people. You go to other places. I said, I didn't say shut up, but I said, be quiet. Our deaf people and our blind people and our disabled people, they know they won't be accommodated, they stay in their homes. Somebody said, I went to Hajj and Umrah, I didn't see too many. I said, you don't see them because nobody is willing to bring them. And if they're brought to this mosque, except Mecca and Medina, you've been there, some of you, many of you, it has access even for tawaf, all the ibadat. It's a little bit challenging because of the weather, because of the crowd, but there is accessibility. But many mosques in the Muslim world still don't have accessibility. It's very sad. It's a very sad thing. So we can brag to the world and say, we Muslims, well, for this, I lower my wings and say, we're also guilty. Because I know I've been in probably more than many of you in many Muslim countries. It's difficult to be disabled. It's easier to be in disability in Canada or America or Europe, because the rule here, you won't get building permit until you include and show in your drawings access for people with disability. And you'll have to dedicate more because of the ramp you take, it takes from the space. So did Islam solve the problem? Well, Islam is an instruction, is a teaching. It needs people who can implement it. Did Muslims solve the problem? Yes. When they apply the teachings of dignity, when they understand the concept of karama, human dignity, when they understand equality not being physical, but rather being spiritual, and being just on the basis of being a human being. When they understand this, we do have stories. We always repeat the story of, the blind man, Abasa wa Tawalla, Abdullah ibn Maktum, the surah Abasa, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala highlighted, the Prophet's behavior, which I always say and defend, he was not any less than any human being, but rather was very courteous, yet by the prophetic and divine standards had to be corrected, but also thereby insisting on being sensitive, oversensitive, and putting yourself in the shoes of someone in disability. And in the context of blessings, we read in Islam that when we appreciate, how we appreciate a blessing, by looking at our conditions without it. So Islam emphasizes the ability of seeing, the ability of hearing, the ability of walking, the ability of smelling, the senses, and tells us thank Allah for being blessed with the blessing of sight. We know someone who loses his sight, you know. And Rasul says, if you lose your habibatay, man faqada habibatay, the sight, the ability to see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no reward for him or her except Jannah. You know, and the person who loses, you know, using analogy, any of these blessings, Allah will definitely reward him. But that's not enough, because we give, oh, Allah will reward you. But do we treat people with disability with respect? As Muslims, it varies from a place to a place. It varies on education. I think Muslims in North America, to a certain extent, maybe in mosque, are more sensitive compared to other places. I have seen people with disability in Muslim countries. Don't brag. Don't tell me. Their situation is worse than here. Because nobody cares about building permits. They build without permit. So I will build it, then permit comes after. And that's why you see places, buildings falling down on people. People caught in fire. Recently in Malaysia, 2 weeks ago, a school, I don't have the details, but it's called pesantren, means like a boarding school. And the access, there was only one door. And the kids who were there in the boarding school, they were caught and fire burned them. They couldn't collect anything but ashes. I've seen buildings, how they are built. No access. It took us months to get permit for this place. And when you look at it, sometimes you're mad at the city and the fire department. But I swear by God, when you look at it and look at the Islamic principles, say, you see, they want to preserve the dignity. Look how many fire exits. 1, 2, 3, 4. There is more, and every place, certain number. These laws, because they understood without giving dignity to human beings, we can move forward. And imagine there is a fire, or there is like some kind of emergency. How will the people with disability, those who cannot see, those who cannot hear, those who cannot walk, how would they be? Islam says this. You know, they say the golden rule, which is revealed in every book. Okay? Islam says, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. None of you believes until he or she loves for others what he or she loves for himself or herself. You don't believe, you don't attain the level of faith. You can't call yourself believer until you reach the level where you love for everybody what you love for yourself, including the people who can't walk, who can talk, who can't see. Have we reached that level? That is the teaching of Islam. But when it comes to implementation, we can say, MashaAllah, we love Rasulullah. Well, this. Al-Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam taught us 1400 years ago that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala judges us, our goodness, in how we treat the weak amongst us and the elderly. A society is judged by how it treats the weak amongst them. And the word weakness here, I know some people say, no, don't use the weakness. Well, it is weakness. Disability puts you in a state of weakness. Maybe not mental, could be physical. But also you may have a physical ability, but you're mentally weak or spiritually weak. So everyone is tested in a different way. And of course, it's good to use the language. It consoles us to tell a person who has disability, Allah will reward you. But when you have the attitude, as the sister said, in mosques and places of worship, towards the people, you know, the intolerance towards the people who may have some kind of, you know, disability or disease or sickness, it's there, unfortunately. And the example of the person who urinated, that he wasn't disabled in terms of morality. He came in the masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah is sitting, companions, and he goes by a pillar like that. Just imagine some guy comes now, goes behind the pillars and starts urinating. Allah, the sister said, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. And then the brothers will jump on him. Imagine, the Prophet ﷺ said, wait, let him finish. Sahaba said, Allah, let him finish? Let him finish. Because something in psychology, when you urinate or sleep, when you're in process or hormones are working, you could cause a trauma that can never be cured. Let him finish. And urinating is a process that is very critical. It needs concentration, release of certain, chemicals to urinate, and let him finish. Look, he noticed that this man has a different kind of disability, a learning disability. He understood from looking at him, he's a person who spends more time with camels and sheep and goats than with humans. Umar ibn Khattab, Sahaba were upset and furious. What is this? This is the house of Allah. He said, calm down, folks. Wait, let him finish. When he finished, said, can you go bring a bucket of water? Of course, they didn't have a carpet like we do. It was more mud. Most of the time, they would pray with their shoes and sandals, And praying with the shoes, it's fine, by the way. You can pray with the shoes, so long as there is no najasa, no impurity on it. Go bring a bucket of water, wash it. And nicely with a smile. This is what we call the attitude, social accessibility. Prophet ﷺ comes. He prevents them from acting, because most of the people will act emotionally in the name of the sanctity of the house of Allah. They will do a lot of wrong. He says, brother, what's your name? Where do you come from? He opens the arms and he says, this place where we are is a masjid, is the house of Allah. We do not urinate in it. We do not do this and that. Oh, the guy, listen, next time you can go certain place. And then when he was leaving, look at this dua he said. Allahumma arhamni warham Muhammada wa la tarham ma'ana ahadan abada. Oh Allah, be merciful to me and to Muhammad, and don't be merciful to anybody else other than the two of us. He was shocked and traumatized. He didn't know. Some people have no common sense. I was in Mecca, Medina, holy places, and I see people, you think they are educated. And I was eating in a restaurant, I swear by Allah, eating my food, hungry, not hungry, and sitting eating my roasted chicken. I came, and I'm sitting with the brother, and this guy sat next to us, and then he finished his food, he put his napkin and this in my plate. Allah, I said, where do you come from? He said, oh, I came from so-and-so country. I said, I'm not asking you came from. Did you come from the jungle? Did you come from the stable? Where did you come from? You're going to make me lose my Hajj. He says, what did I do? I said, didn't you so? Okay. I thought you finished. I said, does the chicken look like finished? But this is no common sense. And how about in Tawaf, people pushing each? There was a video that went around viral a couple of weeks ago of blood near the Kaaba Sharifa. How many of you saw that? And the rumor, a'udhu billah, many Muslims just spread lies. Ya Allah, don't spread the truth with lies. I spoke to Irfan Makki a couple of weeks ago, and I told him, may Allah be with you. Everybody's sending me this video of Hajj with your song, and everybody says Michael Jackson sang about Hajj before he died. I said, if I were you, I'll be frustrated. He said, what can I do? I said, I keep defending you. People, this guy is Irfan Makki from Scarborough. It's not Michael Jackson. No. I had people you would not believe, highly educated. Is it true this guy, Michael Jackson, look, he became Muslim, wallahi. Wallahi, it's Irfan Makki from Scarborough, Ontario. We can't spread the truth by spreading with lies. Anyways, the blood was in the Kaaba. And the video was saying that somebody got killed because he wanted to. Anyways, some rumors, some it said this. People lie. Muslims shouldn't lie. The idea is, I have seen every Hajj I do. Blood near black stone. And who gets hurt? Elderly people, people with disability. And they are scolded. Why you take your wheelchair? It's true that wheelchair harms people in the haram. I myself got hit many times. I'm sure if you did tawaf. But they can't help it. Now, alhamdulillah, they have a place for them to do tawaf and this. But I've seen elderly people, people with disability. You know, sometimes people don't know, they have some kind of physical disability. And sick people, elderly. People have no mercy in the holiest of the holiest places, near the Kaaba. We behave the worst to one another. And who does? Young people. You know, why don't I see Muslims in Olympics winning gold medals? On the weak people? And this is what you see. And blood everywhere. And who? They say was an old lady who got crushed. It's true she shouldn't get into that crowd. But again, if we were merciful. And I had a brother who's a convert that said, you see this one time, I said, do you think if Japanese did Hajj, they will do? He said, no, I don't think. Having lived in Japan, I don't think Japanese would do this. He's right. You can see the lineups in Japan and disability in Japan. If you've been in Japan and Korea, how this people with disability, we have to, we may say we Muslims in Islam, Allahu Akbar, Takbir and this, that all theory. Practice, we have no regard. We have no regard for the people of disability. I can tell you Abasa wa Tawalla and all of that. And we keep, you know, a Prophet ﷺ was not discriminating. Allah made him pay attention. And for him to pay attention to the blind man was better than wasting time with those people of the House of Conference, Dar al-Nadwa in Mecca. There are many stories in Islam where, of course, people with disability were given this. Allah says, لَيْسَ عَلَى الْأَعْمَى حَرَجٌ وَلَا عَلَى الْأَعْرَجِ حَرَجٌ وَلَا عَلَى الْمَرِيضِ حَرَجٌ. Allah speaks of the people who are physically disabled. People who have senses that are not working, such as the people who are blind, deaf, and the people who are sick. Allah has exempted them. So the idea of exemption, it doesn't mean that they are not praying. No. Rasul said to them, talking to them, and to everyone, صَلِّي قَائِمًا فَإِن لَمْ تَسْتَطِعْ فَقَاعِدًا فَإِن لَمْ تَسْتَطِعْ فَعَلَى جَنْبِكَ. Everybody is welcome to pray, he said. Those who can stand, those who can sit, and those who cannot even sit, they are laying on their side. Everybody should join the prayer. That is an open invitation for everybody for salat. If Rasul did, and his masjid was open for such people, who are we to prevent them from that? So, in a nutshell, we need to review our behavior and balance between the essence of Islam, the teaching of Islam, and the modern values that we have, you know, now, and also modern architecture and the means to accommodate these people, because we should be the first as Muslims to restore dignity for everyone, every human being. Inshallah, we will take 10 minutes questions, then we'll go for Isha Salat. Today especially we have a guest, and Sister, the other one, Asma. Abir, you go ahead with the questions. Alaikum salam. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Yeah. Just to save you time, I already mentioned how the Prophet ﷺ plays. It is reported in Bukhari in many hadiths that the Sahaba, back then they didn't have wheelchair, you know, and also the landscape wouldn't help it. But the Sahaba, you would see, the Sahaba would carry two brothers, would go by the brother's place and carry him on both shoulders and carry him to the masjid. It was a familiar scene in Medina to see people go into the masjid and carrying one another. We also have, Islam encourages children to carry their parents who are disabled, and everyone should look after his family. And if not, Muslims should look after each other. So we read also in Sahih Muslim and others that the Sahaba radiallahu anhum would wait when Salat is over until the elderly and the weak goes first. We have also in Sirat Ibn Ishaq, and Zad al-Ma'ad speaks about that, how the behavior of the Sahaba in the masjid, that the elderly and the disabled is given priority when it comes to food, when it comes to talking to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All of those, the stories, multitude of them, show you an atmosphere of consciousness and awareness. And you know why? Because Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, he's not one of us, the one who does not show respect for our elderly and shows mercy for the weak and the young. These are the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
In speaking to many community leaders and shuyukh and the boards of different centers, I think there's an idea that the biggest obstacle is money. But I think, especially when we're talking about changing the culture a little bit, money doesn't have anything to do with that. But I think there's this sort of like resonating idea that in order to make any change, we need hundreds and thousands of dollars. And we don't have that. And the reason why I say that is because more and more we're trying to help, we at Smile are trying to help Islamic schools become more and more accessible and inclusive. And even before we have a chance to engage in discussion, one of the very first things that's brought to the table is, but sister, we have no money. And I think that's not always, yes, of course, we need money, we need resources to make physical changes. We need resources to hire staff. We need resources to educate our staff, yes, and no doubt. And I'm not trying to, belittle that at all, but one thing we need to do is kind of put that notion aside and say, okay, what can we do? With the resources we have, what can we do? So to answer your question, I think that's kind of something that we jump to, but I actually don't think it's our biggest obstacle. I think our biggest obstacle is that we're comfortable, in where we are. And I think oftentimes as human beings, it's just a characteristic that when we get comfortable, we don't always look to see, is everybody included in this conversation? Is everybody included in this jama'ah, in this congregation? And I think that, one of the things that I heard from Sheikh Slimi is that during the time of the Prophet ﷺ is that they, the people often were thinking of the other person, They were thinking of that other person, and I think that's something that we need to do.
I think sister answered. I think it's nafsi problem. Go. Sister Rabi'a, if you want to add something to answer this question, please, the microphone is not too far from you. Okay, because I know she's a, mashallah, resourceful person. Yeah. But in general, you did answer very well. We are selfish. You know me, I'm blunt, I say it as it is. If you're offended, I'm sorry. But we are selfish. So long I am okay, my children are okay, my mother-in-law is okay, then everything is peace. But we don't get, we say in Arabic, nobody feels it except the one who got hit with it. So we have to have that spirit of Rasulullah. He felt for the weak. Look when Khadija radiallahu anha, Sayyida Khadija radiallahu anha, look at this quality. I want you to study this. Why Allah would never let you down. When he had the experience of Zammiluni, Zammiluni, Dathiruni, Dathiruni. When he had the first wahi, when he saw Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam, it was too much on him. And he sweat. And he was so scared. He came to his wife, said, cover me, cover me. He was in a state of shock. This isn't something normal. She said, calm down. This is a wife talking to her husband. She said, Allah will never let you down. For you never return or turn away the weak. And you carry the load of the feeble. And she mentioned how he always worry about the weak and the feeble. That was Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that were his companions. Look, Umar ibn Khattab said, when he was worried, he said, if somebody trips on a road somewhere in Yemen, which is like thousands of kilometers, what will I say to Allah? Why didn't you fix the road? They were conscious for everybody. Somebody trips, most likely somebody with some kind of disability will trip. I would be responsible. We are living for ourselves. Until we live for one another, then things will change. We're all neglectful. When I say we, I don't mean people in this masjid. And one thing, Sister Sukaina, just a correction, and don't take it as an offense, and all of you who keep saying Muslim community. Who told you there is a Muslim community? Muslim communities, I-E-S, plural. We are, I never say Muslim community. Muslim communities. Nobody knows what's happening in the next. We try now with Muslim Council of Peace to do something. We're trying. But to be honest, we are different communities. Unlike some other faith groups, they work together. They coordinate. They use the resources. You get a grant, one writer writes a grant for everybody. Yeah. We don't do that. One mosque gets grant, doesn't tell the other how they did it. And we can cross-purpose. We can use resources. So this is why we need the education. And this starts from the mothers. If the mother teaches her children to care for one another and care for other human beings, they'll grow up. If the mother say, no, only us, and that's it. And fathers, but the mother's teaching and education is very important.
The last question for tonight. What are some specific examples of increased inclusion that you have seen in the Muslim community since Imaam was founded? What are any setbacks, if you have seen?
So since the founding of Smile, what are some things that we've seen increase in inclusion and accessibility, and what are some setbacks? I would say, and yes, Sheikh, you're right, we're definitely different communities, but I would say within some of these, we've seen some really, really amazing accomplishments. I mentioned earlier, this is the first time for myself being in this center. And like this, subhanAllah, is an accomplishment. You know, this is something that we should be proud of, not only having these conversations, but even just the way that this was built. There's a center that's not too far from here, the Masamin Islamic Center, and there's a boy, his name is Abbas Sayed, who I know you know very well, Abir, and he often is the mu'adhin at that center. And Abbas is a young man who has Down syndrome, who lives with Down syndrome. And the fact that he can get up there and call the adhan, and people don't tell him to sit down or be quiet or recall the adhan a second time, really shows that, you know, we are making progress in terms of that culture that we speak about. The fact that we can have a forum like this, and as you know, the Imam mentioned, this isn't the first one or the first time. That is definitely progress. I would say the biggest setback I see is just this, you know, this idea that I mentioned earlier, that in order to make any change, we need a lot of money. You know, I'm not trying to minimize the fact that we do need resources, and inshallah, you know, even today, if any of you can support this center, please do, because we do need resources to make improvements. But that's not the fallback. You know, that shouldn't be a cop-out. That shouldn't be something that we just put on the table, and because of that, we're not going to take any steps forward. I think right now the biggest challenge that we're hearing from our families is especially the desire for our children to go to Islamic schools, or Sunday schools, or madrasa, Quran classes, or halaqas. And many families, when they approach different centers, they're often told things like, your child is going to Jannah. He or she doesn't need to learn Quran. And that's the exact opposite of what the Sheikh was sharing. And so I think, these are some of the obstacles, and I think together with more and more collaboration and more education, inshallah, we can definitely overcome them.
Alhamdulillah, Quran is read in 7 different ways. And one of the ways is qira'at, Nafi', the qira'ah of Medina. Read the story of Qalun. He had a big disability. And he's one of the best qaris in Tunisia and Libya. Read about his story. I wanted to share the story of Qalun, but maybe another time, and how he himself had disability in his time. This is like in the 3rd century. But to wrap up, because of Isha Salat, inshallah, and so we don't have to come back after Halaqah, after Isha to come back. Money, yes, is an issue, and it's true, but I don't think it should sound as a big problem, because we want larger numbers, but we can expect all these numbers, not to come with their challenges. So, but also the people who are advocates have to also slow down a little bit. We don't have the resources that the churches. Churches, people give 10% of their salary. You tell that to the Muslims, you'll be in trouble. They give 10% of their salaries. Other groups, they give their money. You tell to a Muslim, get 10% to the masjid, he'll tell you, are you crazy? So you have to understand that mosques are being challenged. People are coming from their back homes, they want to send their zakat there. So this is definitely zakat eligible fund. So the financial aspect, it is big. But more the financial education. We need human resources. For now, since we started in this center, specifically 2009, I am looking for people who can do sign language. I can get them. And the ones I get, they're very expensive. I can't afford them. And it's true, you have to commit. At least in Ramadan we do halaqas and lectures and khutbas. But honestly, there aren't many Muslims who are trained to do. The global deaf, may Allah bless them, they are trying. There are challenges. So it's not only financial. We need Muslims to be specialized in sign language, in disability. We have some sisters here, they attend. They're specialized in, like Sister Fatima, our social worker. She's for social services. Not you, Fatima, are you here? She's actually her, and Sister Salma. Is Salma here, Hussein? These 2 sisters, they're specialized in autism. And they have given me a lot of guidance. We have kids with autism who do martial arts, who do sports. We have kids with autism in our classes here at Alif Lam Mim Academy. We try to accommodate, but we're not qualified enough to handle these people. Even the scientists are they're confused about autism. They find that within it there are some things that are unbelievably amazing that still we have to discover. But with awareness, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless a smile, and may Allah keep them always smile. And I don't know why you're not showing the smile. Okay, so keep smiling. I love the word smile. And also may Allah bless the CAMD, Canadian Association of Muslims with Disabilities. Thank you, Sister Rabia, for being here. And also Sister Sukaina, you're a wonderful speaker. Come here and give. I'm encouraging sisters to give speech, but they say, no, you speak. I say, I already spoke, you speak. Anyways, may Allah guide us and help us. May Allah bless our ummah, and may Allah bless our Muslim communities to become one community. Insha'Allah. Ameen, ameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Muhammad. Thank you for your patience. I know some of you just came for salat. Okay, just be patient, inshallah. Okay, Hadi. For those online, thank you for joining us. May Allah bless you. And assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.